Hey A&Pers, this is Dr. Jones checking in. This is A&P 1, Lab 2, and I think we're on video 8, and we're talking about the vertebrae now. If it's not top of page 19 for you, then it should look like this, Vertebral Anatomy. So I'm going to start with the biggest vertebrae, which is one of the lumbar vertebrae, and we'll talk about the basic structures that we find. So this biggest part is the vertebral body, this bit. This part out the back is the spinous process, and there's a picture in your book. It should be figure 14.15, and if you can follow along with that, that would be great. You can see the spinous process is posterior. So this bump here is one of the bumps that you feel on your back. So put your hand on like the back of your neck or down the middle of your back. You feel those bumps? These are the spinous processes. The spinous processes are the most posterior of the posterior parts of your vertebrae. The vertebral bodies are anterior. And so since this is lumbar, what's in front of this bone right here are your intestines. Okay, so you've got your abdominal muscles, your intestines, the vertebral body, your spinal cord will be in here, spinous process, and then the skin of your back. Okay, so that's where we are. So this is mid-sagittal, and then these are lateral. Okay, and let's name these two lateral bits. These are the transverse processes. And since we are in the lumbar spine, the transverse processes are quite small. Vertebral foramen, as you know, a foramen is a hole in the bone, and since this is a vertebrae and it has a hole in it, then this is the vertebral foramen, the hole in the vertebrae. The spinal cord lives in the vertebral foramen, although this is the lumbar, this is a lower lumbar, so this will just be the cauda equina, but we will learn that later in the semester. Okay, for now, the name of the hole is the vertebral foramen. Okay, now you need to know top from bottom on this thing. And how you know is that the spinous process always points down. So if the spinous process is pointing up, then you are upside down. So flip. Okay, see how the spinous process points down? Here on the lumbars, the spinuses point just a little bit down. You can see on a thoracic, the spinuses point straight down, and the cervicals just a little bit down. But if you have it upside down, then it does point up a smidge, so there you go. Okay, so this is superior because the spinous points down, so down is inferior. So right here, behind the vertebral body, between the vertebral body and the spinous process, and hold this where you can see it, is the inferior vertebral notch. So it's this little indent right here, just big enough to put a pipe cleaner in there. You can see it from the other side. Vertebral notch. The superior articular facet. A facet is a flat joint surface. Now, just a second, we had a list of terms going on. That's our mitosis. There we go. Terms we need to know. As a review, if you don't know those or that, these are things you need to know. Where were we? We were at facet. A facet is a flat joint surface. What's the other joint surface we had? A condyle, but a condyle is a curved joint surface and a facet is a flat joint surface. Ish, mostly. Okay. All right, superior articular facet. So we just worked out which was superior. You make sure the spinous points down, and then this is superior. And articular means that it's a joint surface. So superior articular facet means it's the top joint surface. So It's a bit Department of Redundancy department. So you may notice in the picture that this whole sticky uppy part is called the superior articular process, but that is not on our lab list. What we're looking for is this smooth joint surface here and here. These are the superior articular facets. So then we need the inferior articular facets. So now we need to look under. You see these smooth joint surfaces here. It's an inferior articular facet, inferior articular facet. So the whole sticky arty part down here is the inferior articular process, but the smooth joint surface part is the part that's on our lab list, and that's the inferior articular facet. And then we have the intervertebral disc. The intervertebral disc is fibrocartilage that sits between the two vertebrae. So those are your discs in your back. They're made of fibrocartilage, and they're called the intervertebral disc. Remember, inter is between two, like the interstate goes between two, versus intra. The intranet connects in the computers in your house or business, and the internet connects you to computers outside your house or business. Okay. And we also need this hole right here. This is the intervertebral foramen. Now, when we have just one bone by itself, this part of it is called the inferior articular notch. I'm sorry, the inferior vertebral notch. I should look at it before I say it. But when you have the two bones together, then it is the, make sure it's showing, there we go. This hole that goes through here is the intervertebral foramen. So let me be very clear here. What is this hole in one vertebra? The vertebral foramen. And then what is this hole between two vertebrae? Get them lined up right. The intervertebral foramen. So what comes out there are the spinous nerves. The spinal nerves, and let me show you. Okay, you can see the intervertebral discs between the vertebral bodies, and you can see the spinal nerves coming out of the intervertebral foramen. You can see the transverse processes laterally, the spinous processes behind, and if you look up in between, you can see the spinal cord, or the yellow plastic being the spinal cord, in the vertebral canal. So all the vertebral foramen together make the vertebral canal. Okay, so those are your basic vertebral structures, and we're at 8 minutes, so we will stop and come back and cover the specific vertebral structures between the different regions. So thank you as always for tuning in. It's good to virtually see you here. The education must go on. Dr. J out.